On this week's show, we go a couple announcements that are YouTube related. Greg goes deep, deep, deep into the Reflex app with a solid, deep review of it. And we both talk about some photos we've taken with some tips involved regarding the photos on this week's show.
It's Love Day, Monday, February 14th, 2022. And this is the iPhoneography podcast. My name is Greg McMillan, and I'm joined by my wonderful co-host, Dave Podner. Hello, Dave.
Hey, Greg, how's it going?
It's not going too bad. Had a nice day today, not having to go to work. And
Ooh, always
of course,
nice.
any day off's a good day off.
Very true. Very true.
Yeah. How about yourself? Did you guys do anything today? Anything special?
No, unfortunately, I worked till 5. So I was pretty much working the entire day, but it could be worse. I could not have a job. So yay, positive.
Yeah, and then somebody like me has to hold you up in the evening.
That's okay.
Every day is Love Day, though, eh?
Well, that is true. That is true.
Yeah.
But so, of course, we're here to talk about the most important thing to talk about on today's date. And that is, of course, the officiating from the Superb Owls, because we don't want to have copyright issues about last night. So we're going to talk about a good 4 or 5 hours about the officiating, the halftime show, the whole thing, right?
Well, I did watch the game. And I really don't know much about football, but actually, I thought it was a pretty decent game. I didn't have a dog in the fight. So, I mean, I was hoping that the Buffalo Bills would have went to the Super Bowl, but they got put out. So, I mean, I say I didn't have a dog in the fight, but I kind of was hoping Cincinnati would win because I don't believe they've ever won the Super Bowl before.
No.
So
third time going, first time. Yeah. Third time going.
Yeah. I thought it was really cool that they made it, and then it would have been even better if they'd have won it. Now the Rams, I don't know when the last time they made the Super Bowl or won the Super Bowl. I don't know. Like I say, I'm not a football fan really.
Right.
I kind of go by what I hear at work and stuff like that. But no, I thought it was a decent game because it wasn't a blowout, which was good.
True,
nobody totally dominated. At some points the defense on each team really shone. And there were some nice long throws that were caught, which makes for, exciting plays and things like that. So I thought that was cool, but the halftime show,
It depends. Well, I'll say this. The halftime show depends on, and by the way, folks, I just threw this completely blind to Greg. He had no idea I was going to bring it up.
That's true. But that's
no
okay.
idea. But no, I would say this. I didn't really watch the game one way or the other. I had a couple friends who were Cincinnati fans who were from Cincinnati. But for the halftime show, it depends on, I know a lot of people who grew up on that music.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So
I do too.
They just
as old as I am, I do know some people who grew up in that music.
Well, I mean, Greg, I mean, if you look at the people there, all but one person was in their later 40s or mid 50s.
Yeah, pretty much, eh?
Eminem's 49, Snoop Dogg's 50, Mary J. Blige, I think, is 52 or something like that, and Dre's 54.
Wow.
So they're all, these are not young kids. So, but I mean, they're people around my age. So a lot of people I grew up with and I'm friends with, this is the music they grew up with.
Yeah, that's true.
You're getting some kickback from some people who, unfortunately, I think I see a lot of the kickback comes from people who are older and just saying how dare these people with these young kids and act like this. And it was like, okay, it wasn't for you. The halftime show was programmed for people in their 40s and 50s. And the NFL,
which was probably the average age of the football, fandom, I would think.
And that's what football's trying to do, is they're programming the halftime show to keep people who are watching the game watching the halftime show, because it is a big business. People don't realize, like, the cheapest tickets were $2,000.
Yeah, that's crazy.
At least. So But oh yeah,
And then,
like I said,
there's the fact that it was in LA. I mean,
yeah.
that's a big, big place for hip hop and rap.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I don't get me wrong, I do appreciate those artists for what they can do. It's not my style of music, which is fine, but I mean, I have a really deep appreciation for, all genres of music, all kinds of, songs that these, people sing and write and all that stuff. So I grew up in the 80s, right? So that's kind of where I'm stuck. But that's it was a good halftime show for the fact that if that's your kind of music, you probably just were sitting in awe.
Oh yeah, people loved it.
And I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to lie. I was tapping my foot because if it's got a beat, I'll listen to it.
And I mean, were people really expecting that Snoop Dogg was going to be out there with Martha Stewart giving household tips?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, they did have a show that was like that.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But that's not what he was there for.
I think out of all of them, I think Snoop was probably my favorite. I've heard a good chunk of his music. There was a guy that worked with me there last year who's now gone out and started his own business, but we have a stereo in our color booth at work, and just to pass the day away, we'll put some music on in the background. And he grew up. He's one of the ones that grew up with that music. Dr. Dre, Tupac, Snoop Dogg, all these guys, right? And he'll put on some Snoop Dogg and just let it play, and some of that stuff it had a pretty good vibe to it. Again, it's not something that I would normally listen to, but if it's playing, I don't mind listening to it. It's just it was. I say nah when I talk about the halftime show, but that's the only reason. It's just because it's not my type of music. But as far as the halftime show itself went, it was pretty good spectacle. It was pretty well done, and it's amazing how they put these things together, put them out in the field in such a short time. And I thought the map was pretty cool on the floor. People dancing on them. It looked like a map of LA or a city. Anyway, you could see street lights on the streets and all that stuff. I thought that was kind of cool. So anyway, okay, so we've got a couple of announcements to make real quick here before we get into the meat and potatoes of the show. If you're looking for this on YouTube, you won't find it because it's just too much work to put the YouTube video or the YouTube version of this podcast together. And, the time that takes to edit and, put the titles in and all that stuff and upload it and, make a thumbnail for the channel and all that stuff. I was finding that it was way more work than what it felt like it was worth. Not making any money from it for one thing. And it was just taking up a lot of time. And being a shift worker, it's not like I have a ton of time to do that sort of thing. Sometimes I'd be up till 1, 2 in the morning, whatever. But the YouTube channel will remain in place. And what we're planning for that is, and I'm not going to guarantee this, but let's say we have a guest. We may have a video version for an episode when we have a guest for an interview or something. But we're also thinking about stuff like little shorts that we could put on. Like I think it was on the last show. Dave had a video that he did with a screen recording on his phone of how he took a macro shot with his iPhone 13 Pro Max. Something like that, I can very easily put up on the channel because it won't take much time. And, we thought maybe we can entertain people with things like that, like, app tutorials, just short little videos that might be, maybe no more than 5 minutes long, or maybe a video of us editing a photo or something like that using, certain apps. So I know there's some people that really like the YouTube channel because they like to watch it. They want to watch the discussion as it goes. But I do apologize to those, but it's just a lot of work, and it's so much easier just to put the audio out. Now, the audio still will have the enhanced version where there will be photos that come up on your screen of your phone where the podcast logo is when we're talking about certain photos. And, this show is going to be no exception. We're going to, whenever we talk about a photo, look at your phone screen, as long as you're not driving or whatever, when it's safe, and you'll see the image that we're talking about. So that's where it's at with that. I do apologize for those who wanted to see a YouTube version, but again, it's just too much work. So speaking of YouTube, Dave and I went online with David Addison the other night, and we had a little discussion about his YouTube channel, which he had announced that in his last video. At the end of the video, he announced that he was going to be quitting YouTube and shut it down. Well, due to overwhelming response from his viewers, he's decided to keep it up and just do a video the odd time whenever he feels he has the time to do it. He has his reasons for doing this, and maybe the next time he does a video, he'll explain it better than I can right now. But we're keeping the possibility open for the David Addison show as well, because if he wants to do a podcast where he can interview someone or whatever, and not have to worry about putting it together a YouTube video, then I'm hoping that he'll do that, and we'll put it up on the channel. But so if you're anxiously awaiting David's next video, I can honestly say I don't know when it'll be, but I do believe that he will keep going, but at a very, very slow pace, much slower pace than he was before. And that's what he's decided to do, and I respect him for it and support him in whatever he's doing. So that's pretty much it for the announcements. Alrighty, so we're going to talk about a camera app called Reeflex. Now, this app has been out for, I'm going to guess, the better part of a year. I'm not sure when it came out of the scene, but I've been using it exclusively for probably a month now. And if you've been listening to this podcast, I've been a real proponent of Halide. But I got to tell you, I haven't used Halide since I've started using Reeflex. So Reeflex is developed by some gentlemen over in Europe, Switzerland, I think, and Italy. Like, there's 3 of them, and they're kind of spread around a little bit, but they're a great bunch of guys. I've spoken to them on Zoom, and I really love what they've done with this app and where they're going with things. And so to begin with, the app is free. That's a good thing. There's a slow shutter function in it that is an in-app purchase, but it's very reasonable. Dave, do you remember offhand what the in-app purchase is in US dollars?
It's $4.99.
Okay, so that's pretty good. That's really good for a camera app that's got all these features that I'm going to go through here. And for $5 US to get the slow shutter function, I can tell you, it's worth it. So the user interface, it's really nice and clean. It's well designed, and as I go through these features, we'll explain a little more. That'll help you get a grip of the user interface. But I'm going to put a screenshot of the lower section of the UI on the screen of the podcast like I would a photo, so that as I'm talking about those things, you'll know where they are and how to access them. So features. Okay. So it has full manual control, and you can control, like it has auto, but you can also control things manually. Full manual control of focus, shutter speed, ISO, white balance, and EV, or exposure value. That's your exposure compensation. And you tap on these different things to activate them. But if you want to go back to auto, you just double tap on the viewfinder and you're back in auto again. So these are in probably no particular order as they appear in the UI, but you'll be able to see what I mean by them. So focus peaking, that's a pretty good one, because a lot of the good camera apps have this. Camera M, Halide, First Light, Camera Plus 2, all these apps have focus peaking. And if you're not familiar with that, what it is when you're manually focusing, whatever is in sharp focus will have green lines on the edges to indicate that that's the part that's in focus. Now with Reeflex, you can, in the settings, you can customize the color of this focus peaking thing. You can go red, green, or blue. Just depends on which color you prefer. The interface itself is in green, so I like to leave the focus peaking in green, but that's just personal preference. So live histogram. There's a little, let me see here. So there's right above the shutter button, there's a row of icons. There's 4 icons. There's the focus peaking. There's the histogram button. So when you tap the histogram button, the histogram appears at the top of the viewfinder, and you can have it as luminosity, which is like basically just for brightness. It shows the histogram for brightness of the image, and it's just in white. Or you can have it in RGB, which shows all 3 different color channels and what the histogram readings are for those. So if you're, say, taking a picture of a red flower, I've often seen times when the red will kind of be overexposed, and you can dial down the exposure to recover that, so that you don't have just pure red blotchy parts in the image of the flower. I've come across that doing macro work and stuff like that. So the histogram is a good tool to use, and it's nice to be able to either go with just the main brightness of the image or 3 different color channels. And you just tap on the histogram to switch between those 2 modes. So it's pretty easy. So next is actually just carrying right across that row of icons above the shutter button, you see a round icon with these diagonal lines in it, and that's for the zebra stripes. Now the zebra stripes, when they're turned on, they can give you a little warning whether you're overexposed or underexposed. And in Reeflex, the zebra stripes come in 2 different kinds. Just like the histogram, you got RGB or luminosity. And again, it's customizable in the settings. The luminosity, it turns either red when it's overexposed or blue when it's underexposed. But when you use the RGB, it's a little more precise, because it gives you basically a warning when you're too light or too dark with the red and the blue. But if you overexpose or underexpose to the point where you are actually going to lose color data or brightness data or whatever in the image, it turns like a grayish black color. And if you see that, then you cannot recover that when you're trying to edit the photo. You may have a chance with RAW, just because RAW has that flexibility. But if you're shooting JPEG and you overexpose it to the point where it's like the zebra stripes are black, then you're not going to get that data back. You're not going to get any detail in those highlights or shadows. So that's something to remember. So then I'm going to save the next icon on that row for later because that's the slow shutter one. But let's see here. Next, we'll go with separate focus and exposure reticles. So you've probably seen this in some other camera apps where you have these two little circles come up on the screen, and one would be for focus, another one for exposure. Well, Reeflex has this as well. If you just lift your camera and take a picture, it'll focus. It'll autofocus on, whatever it thinks you want to focus on, just like the Apple camera does. But if you want to use the separate reticles for exposure and focus, just 2-finger tap on the screen, and then you'll see the focus one will come up with a little plus sign in the middle, and the exposure one will come up with a little, kind of like a little sun icon with little rays around it. And then you can move those to where you want to get your focus and your exposure set. And if you want to lock them, you tap and hold them, and then they'll turn. In my iPhone, it's green. I don't know if it changes with the focus peaking settings or not. I haven't tried that out, but it'll turn a color, and that means it's locked. So then you can say, get your focus and exposure set, and then you can recompose after that and take your shot how you want. So that's kind of a cool thing. Next, I've got a level indicator. So right at the top dead center of the screen, above the viewfinder, is a square. It's like a square just with the corners of the square. I mean, you'll see it if you open the app or if you take a look at it. And then if you tap that, the level indicator comes on in the center of the screen, and a little plus sign shows up in that square. So the level indicator is absolutely crucial for, say, leveling the horizon and things like that. I use it all the time because if it's one thing I don't like is a crooked horizon, unless it's like over 30 degrees or something like that, then it's pretty much intentional. Could be a happy accident, but the level indicator is my one thing that an app has to have for me to use it. And all the good camera apps have them, of course, but that's the one thing that's missing in the Apple camera app. I think it would be just invaluable in that app because I've seen a lot of people post pictures where the horizon's just a little off, and it's maybe because because they're using the Apple camera app and it doesn't have that level indicator. So it's a great tool to have, and you can just turn it on and off simply by tapping that little box up in the top. And of course, it has grid lines. You could have your thirds just the same as the Apple camera app, and then you have what I call it compressed thirds. It just means that the lines are closer together and the square in the center is smaller. And then they have another one that's square. So to access these, you'll see like a tic-tac-toe sign up in the top above that icon I was just mentioning about the level indicator. So you tap that, and then there's your choices for, you'll see one that's got a lot of lines in it. Well, that basically shuts it off. And then you've got the normal rule of thirds grid, then the compressed grid, and a square. So if you're taking, say, photos for Instagram and you want a square, it doesn't shoot square. It just gives you a square guide in the center of the frame, so that when you go to edit the photo and in the crop section, when you hit the square, it's going to just probably be right where you want that. So kind of a handy tool to have. And then on the very top left corner is the flash icon. Now, when you first get the app and use it, it's on by default. So if you're like me and you don't ever want to use the flash, you just tap that flash icon and you have on, off, auto, or torch. Now, torch is when the light is always on, like, you're walking around the house at night and you got your iPhone light on. I do that all the time. And that's handy for, if your dog's sleeping on the couch and you want to catch a shot of it, but you want to make sure that everything's in focus, you can turn that on and away you go. So the other one in the top row between the level indicator and the flash is the timer. Now this timer is pretty cool because it has 3 different intervals. It has 3, 10, and 20 seconds. I think the longest you get on the iPhone camera, the native camera app, is 10 seconds. So it's nice to be able to have 20 seconds, give yourself more time to get yourself in the shot or whatever you're going to do. 3 seconds is great for when you're still going to be standing at the camera. You got it on a tripod. You want to reduce camera shake, just go 3 seconds and Bob's your uncle, you're done. So now moving down. Oh, and the other icon at the top right is just simply the button that you hit to switch to the selfie camera. So you can go back and forth like that. That's pretty straightforward. Now you've got camera modes. So down beside the shutter button to the right, I'm not sure what it defaults to when you first open the app. It might be either JPEG or HEIF, but you tap that, you can go through your JPEG, RAW, or ProRAW. Of course, it depends on how you have it set up. It's customizable in the settings. If you can pick either HEIF, JPEG, or TIFF as your first option, and then you can go with RAW or ProRAW. But you can also go with RAW plus JPEG and ProRAW plus JPEG, which will, of course, give you one of each photo in your camera roll. Also in the settings is location. You can turn it on and off. Some people don't like to use location for their photos, and that's okay. I personally use it all the time because if I'm ever out somewhere and want to know where a photo is taken, then I can just look it up in the Photos app, swipe up, or hit the little eye with the circle around it for the info on the file, and it'll show me exactly where that picture was taken. So moving up from there to the row right at the bottom of the viewfinder, that's where you've got your manual controls. So you've got your white balance control. This is just a slider to achieve the proper color temperature, and it tells you the value where it has the WB for the white balance. And so it's not just a bunch of presets like, daylight, fluorescent, all that stuff. You can actually fine tune the white balance, whether you're in JPEG or RAW. And this was really good because just today I went into a store to buy a new winter coat, and I wanted to text a picture to show my wife because I wasn't sure that she would want to look at me with this color of coat on. And it was kind of like a yellowish, brownish color coat, more yellow than brown, I guess. So when I held Reeflex up to take the picture, what I saw on my screen didn't match what I was looking at. So I was able to adjust the white balance right there real quick to match what I was looking at, so that when I sent it to my wife, she was able to get a good, proper look at the color of this coat. And as it turns out, she thought I should get it. And then I found another one that was black that I think was warmer. So anyway, that's the coat story. But so that's, white balance, manual white balance control, as precise as that is a pretty good thing because, I'll say this, Halide, it has like the 5 different presets. There's no going in between. There's no fine tuning the white balance unless you want to do it in post. But it's nice to be able to do that during or before the shot. So, and then on the other side of the shutter button, on the left-hand side, is the camera selector. So you can cycle through, if you have a 3-camera phone, like the pros, like the pro model phones, you can go through from wide to tele to ultra wide, or I'm not sure what order it goes in, but that's how you cycle through the different cameras. And so that's pretty plain and simple. Okay, so now just before I get into some other things, I'm going to go back to the row above the shutter button with the slow shutter function. Tap that button. It looks like an aperture ring or whatever. You tap that function or that button rather, and in the lower side of the viewfinder pops up a little uh, square thing or there. Now I've got it up so I can look at it. So you see the slow shutter functions come up, and it says off. So you tap the off to turn it on. On lights up in green, and then on the other side of that you got an M. You tap that, it becomes an L. So you've got motion blur or light trails. Now again, this is in the in-app purchase for this function. So if you've got this, then this is what this is all about. But if you're still in the free version, I don't know if that button will be there. It probably won't be there. It'll probably be there, but you won't.
Yeah. So actually, I just tested it. If you hit the button to go into slow shutter mode, it basically gives you just a couple of examples of slow shutter.
Oh, okay.
And it's saying, well, right now it says $4.99 lifetime, so it is in the subscription. That's a very important thing, but that's 50% off right now for a promo launch. So sometime it is going to switch over to $10.
Oh, okay. Okay, well, then get it while it's hot, folks, because it's well worth it. All right. So, okay, thanks, Dave, for mentioning that. Now that you mentioned that, I do remember the first time I hit that, seeing this pop-up come up with these different examples. So that's cool. So in the center of that little display there, you have 0.5 seconds. And if you swipe up on that, it changes from like 1 to 2 seconds, 3, 4, 5, 7, 10. And there's a lot of little increments that it goes up into the minutes, 5, 10, 20, 30, 1 hour, 2 hour, and it even has a bulb setting. So if you're doing, say, star trails, then you can have your phone sitting on a tripod, plug it into a little, power brick or something to keep it going, and you can sit there and do star trails for probably hours. I don't know how long the longest one's been, but you can do it for hours and come up with a really cool photo. So that's and the slow shutter thing. You can set the duration, which is one thing. But the nice thing about Reeflex is you can still go into your manual controls, and you can manually select a shutter speed that would be suitable for the subject of your photo. Like if you're doing, say, like a river and you want to get that flowing effect in the river. I don't know how many times I've seen slow shutter camera apps where you can't adjust the shutter speed itself. All you can do is adjust the duration of the shot, like 3 seconds to whatever. With Reeflex, you can adjust the shutter speed so that it's slow enough that as it's building these frames throughout the exposure, it'll actually overlap them or blend them together. I'm not sure what it does, whether it's an overlap or just such a quick blend between one and the other that it's such a smooth flow for the image. Like, say, like again, the waterfall or the water example. If it doesn't have this functionality to adjust the shutter speed, then you're looking at that braiding effect, and you have to go at least 8 seconds at times to get that to all blend in properly. But with Reeflex, you can do like a half, 1 second, 2 second exposure of water flowing and still get that smoothness that you want without the braiding. And that is just invaluable to me because I really like shooting that kind of thing. Same with light trails. When you're doing light trails, sometimes if the shutter speed is too fast for the subject, like if the car's moving too fast for that particular shutter speed, then you get these little dashes, this little incremental dashes of light rather than a nice smooth line of light in your frame. So again, that's where the shutter speed adjustment will fix that. So you have to play around with it, experiment with it to see what's going to work the best. I haven't been able to get out and try that particular thing yet at night because it's been so cold here. And I honestly don't know when it's going to warm up, but it's been so cold, especially at night. Like we're talking around 0 to -5 Fahrenheit. So it's been pretty cold. And I prefer not to be out in that kind of cold trying to shoot photos at night. But that's slow shutter mode, and it's really good. It's really worth it. So if it's still half price, I say go get it. So the last thing I have for the app, and I could be missing some stuff here, but I was writing these notes out just before we went on the air here, is the photo gallery. So in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, you've got your little image preview there. You tap that and it goes into your gallery where you see a grid of images, and you can tap on one to see just that whole image. Pretty common amongst camera apps. And at the bottom of the screen, so in the grid view, in the top right, you'll see the word select. So you can select 1 to however many you want, and you can set them as a favorite, delete them, or there's a share icon. So you can send them in a text message or whatever. And that if you open an image and you're looking at just one image, then those buttons come alive at the bottom. There's no need to hit the select button. You can select, or you can just share the image. Just typical share sheet, I suspect, with Twitter, Instagram, messages, whatever, mail, and then you can set it as a favorite. You can delete it. So that is pretty much all I can think of off the top of my head about Reeflex, and I'm really liking it. I am really liking it. I had it in my phone for probably 2 or 3 months before I started using it, but I was still at that point where Halide was doing everything I wanted it to do. But then when Reeflex came out with the slow shutter stuff, actually the developers got a hold of me and asked me if I wanted to try the beta with the slow shutter, and I thought, yeah, sure, I'd be glad to. So I put it in my phone and I started using it, and I haven't turned back. It's in the home row on my iPhone. No matter what screen I go to, it's there. I can hit it and open it, and I'm having a lot of fun with it. So I'm not trying to sell it on you or anything. I'm just saying what I'm thinking, or saying what I feel about it. And I really, really, really like it. So it's free. Give it a try. And if you really want to get into the slow shutter stuff, half price right now. So maybe you want to give that a go too. And so that's boy, I think that's a lot of yakking about it, but I mean, it's pretty cool. Dave, do you have any comments or questions or anything?
Well, one thing I really like about it is there's very few hidden things. And that's one thing I don't like about some camera apps, where if you want to do something, it's either not on screen or you have to click and hold and certain things pop up, but it's not a lot of times evident what you're supposed to do, where there are no hidden options, there are no hidden menus. The only menu is like you said, for capture options, do you want RAW only or RAW and JPEG? Or if you want the what kind of format for default, but you can change that once you're in the app too. Yeah. So you can cycle between all that. So it's kind of the only thing that's in the menu is the default, but everything else can be changed without having to dig 3 levels deep in a menu and try to figure out what they mean here. Well, do I hit the button? Do I don't hit the button? Does this mean it's on, or does this mean that, it's very simple, straightforward in terms of getting something set up, especially for something where you can go from completely automatic to 100% manual, because it does, like I said, there's the bulb mode for the slow shutter. But I think it maxes for the timed one. It times you out at 2 hours.
Yeah.
But again, you have bulb mode where, right. Now, the thing is, I hate to, if you're doing 2 hours, more than likely you have to have the thing plugged in, because it's going to drain battery. Even the biggest 13 Pro Max, once you hit 2 hours, I doubt if it's going to, it could. But that would be shocking to have it last that long. So yeah, I really like I like the look out of it. And if you're into a manual app, especially if you want to play with it and see if you like the setup and see how it takes photos without having to put out the money for the slow shutter, or just as a kind of a trial, even though it isn't a trial, but it's kind of, give it a try for no dollars. Give it a try, see if you like the layout, see if you like how the photos turn out. And like I said, I can see if you're someone who likes to deal with the manual adjustments beforehand and to set the exposure, to set the focus, you want to see the histogram before you take the photo. Definitely a good app. If you're someone who's like, I like to do point and shoot and deal with it later, it'll do that, but it depends if you feel comfortable or not, or if you just want to go with like the built-in camera app, which can just do a lot of things automatically.
Yeah. And it has Pro RAW, right? So,
right.
I mean, there's, the ability to shoot it in Pro RAW. And then if it doesn't turn out the way you thought you like it, then you can just go in and play around with it in another app later.
Mm-hmm. Most definitely.
Yeah. So, yeah, well, that's Reeflex, folks. Great camera app. Boy, I'm going to say it's one of the best out there. That's all I could say. I said to Dave before we started recording, I'm a tinkerer with my photo or with my photography. I like these settings. I like to be able to, play around with these settings and stuff like that. So, but it also is good for just pointing and shooting. Maybe a little less intuitive than the Apple camera app, but that's okay. It's still fairly easy to use. So, okay, that's Reeflex. Let's move on to some tips, Dave.
Okay. So, as we've been doing is selecting 3 photos we've taken since the last recording and talk about it. And I think we both do, bring a tip that's regarding one of the photos that we took. Maybe not all 3, but one of the photos. So I think the first one we talked about, it was a macro shot I took in, it wasn't one of our bigger snows. It was one of our lighter snows, but it was a paw print. And you can actually see in the paw print where there was a leaf down there and I'm not sure which dog stepped on it. But you can see the leaf was underneath the paw print. And it was just when the snow was fresh. There wasn't any melting or refreezing. So it was just all crystal. And it was this really nice paw print taken. Now, we have smaller dogs. So I'm thinking this may be Charlie, who is a miniature poodle. So, his foot we're not talking a big, massive foot or a larger dog. And I just love the way that you can see his individual paw pads in the impression in the snow.
Yeah, that's cool.
And there was a little snow that happened right afterwards because you can actually see in the paw print some snow crystals coming down on top, doing like a light dusting.
Yeah, you can really see the detail in the snowflakes. Mm-hmm. We're not talking like Don Komarechka snowflakes here. We're just looking at snowflakes. I mean, the photo itself is probably the length of the footprint, and then half or that much again, half on either side as far as above and below it goes, and. But I mean, you can see the leaf through there. You can see all the little. It looks like a bunch of little spikes or whatever that the snow. Like there's a name for these types of snowflakes, and Don Komarechka he could be able to look at this and tell you exactly what they are. But they're almost like little cylinders or something. Mm-hmm. These types of flakes, but yeah, it's really cool. And the other thing I like about this, Dave, is that you've got the light coming from the side, so that on the right hand side, the side of the paw prints of the each print from the pads is in shade, and then on the left side the edges are lit up even more so than the surface of the snow, like the flat surface, which
Mm-hmm.
gives a really good indication of texture.
No, thanks for I mean, it would again. This is one of those happy accidents that if you have your phone with you when you're just doing day-to-day stuff, you can just pick up and see.
Yeah, yeah, and you know what? You can even see where the dog's toenails hit the
Mm-hmm.
snow out in front of them, the paw, the pads, which
Yeah.
is pretty cool. Yeah, that's awesome.
Oh, thanks, man. The second one was actually a shot I took. Now, this it's a couple days since we've had some warmer weather, so there's no snow left on the ground right now. But this was last week when we still had snow, and I was just going for a walk at lunch, and where this is at work, there's a good amount of buildings around. So what I did is I got on my hands and knees, right on the. Luckily, this is our parking lot. This is not on a roadway. Got on my hands and knees, so I got a very very low angle shot. So the hill hid the buildings that were behind the tree right here without any branches, without any leaves on it.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're seeing is at the there. And this is one thing; it does compress distance here because what's kind of right in front of you is only a few feet away, while the tree was a good 20, 30 feet away. But because of the real low angle I was at, and the fact that we did have some breaks in the clouds, I just like the contrast there. And again, using that really low angle to get the angle shot here. Also, the partially hide power lines, which were close by. Because I didn't necessarily want to. Touch Retouch does a great job, but if you cannot take the photos, not get them in a photo, so I don't even have to retouch it, that sometimes works even better.
Yeah. That's a great angle. I mean, that's a good tip in and of itself, right there. I know your tip is about something different, but I mean, don't always shoot from eye level. Get down low or whatever, right? That really can make or break a photo, and it sure makes this one very interesting.
Yeah, because I have another shot where it was a much higher angle, and it just didn't look as clean, and it didn't look as interesting, even though it was literally for like a 3 foot higher shot than what I had here.
Yeah. Yeah, it sure makes a big difference.
Yep.
And the drama in the clouds really adds to it.
Yeah, that was a preset in Polar that I did, or Polar.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I honestly, I'm not sure how it's pronounced.
I think it's Polar.
Polar, oh yeah. But yeah, so that's some additional shading that I did with the image that, trying to give that bluish tinge to the clouds even. But keeping a little bit of the brown there so the whole thing isn't just blue in image. Yeah,
no, it's a great shot.
And the last one was one when I was just, honestly, I'm not sure why I had to go out to the garage, but I went out to the garage, and before I turned the light on, I just took a photo of the light coming through our garage front windows. And just inverse shadow, if you want to call it that, on the side of the wall. And there was I think there's a push broom that's kind of hanging against the wall there that I use for snow removal. So you get a nice triangle with a couple of segments, and the segments are caused by the one is the actual handle of the broom, and the other one's the shadow of the angle of the handle of the broom.
Oh, okay.
And I did adjustments on here in terms of overlays and Polar to add color to the shading. Because if you look at it without, when I just took the picture of it, it was gray. It was this gray on gray, but it had an interesting color gradient to it. The shading gradient. So I put a couple extra overlays on top, and it only adjusted the light part, and the dark part stayed black. So it has a nice little kind of green to light blue to darker blue to purple rainbow effect, if you will, but just concentrating on that part of the spectrum and not going the full way. So it was just something I tried to do a little bit different. And then just to try something, I went in, and because you can change the hue of with a lot of the apps you use, and I think I did again Polar just because I was there. You can change the hue of a photo or or tint of I think this was maybe tint by just using a bar going across. So what I did is I did a screenshot while I was changing it, so it looked like it was a pulsating light. So the color was changing as it was going. I took the screenshot, kind of chopped it so you only had the photo part. And I just uploaded that to the video. I uploaded to Instagram and put some kind of smoothing music behind it, just for something a little different, something to try.
That's interesting. Yeah, and I've said this to you before, like, since you've got that iPhone 13 Pro Max, your creativity is just oozing out of your pores.
That's so also one, just trying something different here. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to look up on Instagram and see this. It wasn't just a story, was it? It was a
no. It's actually I put that one in a reel. I put it in a reel, actually.
Oh, that's cool. So I'll put a link to this in the show notes.
Okay.
And
and I also
that's neat.
Yeah, and I also put I think I did that in TikTok itself. They had an overlay for, I forget what they call it. It looks like sparkly rainbow glitter going across the screen.
Almost looked like from a disco ball, but in slow motion.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. That is really cool. That, you know what? I never would have thought to do all that stuff to it. That's that's pretty cool. So yeah. So now your tip.
Sure. The tip was looking
regards to this photo.
Yeah, regarding the photo here is looking at negative space, because even though the color is what draws you in, but if it was that color with, because I did take one photo where I'd used night mode, and of course you're able to see not only the shadow across the wall, you can see the wall pretty clearly and everything that's around the wall.
Yeah.
It's a garage,
Yeah.
So we have stuff in there because it's the garage. But I wanted just to do a heavy focus on the light part that was coming in. So I did it so the rest of it was the negative space. So using that negative space to highlight what you want to highlight, basically blacking out everything but a little bit there, and using that to help focus and see what's going on.
Yeah.
Because I know you can do like an older photography, you can actually use a mask, a physical mask to mask out space. But if you're in a darker area, you can adjust the image so the black space is truly black and acts as a frame, and you can draw your eye to what you want it to be drawn to.
Yeah. Yeah. And it really works in this one. Like having everything blacked out, it really emphasizes the color that you've given it. So yeah, definitely mission accomplished there. All right. So, okay. So I guess I should have said when we started looking at these are, our recent photos, right? So Dave showed, or we saw what Dave did. And again, on your phone screen, you should have been able to see them. And again, we'll have links in the show notes for his Instagram post of that one we just looked at. And boy, I tell you, the video is so much cooler than the image when you see it. But so for me, again, I've been using Reflex for about a month or so now, and all my pictures were taken with Reflex. And this one, I used the slow shutter function for it. So we're looking at a picture of a ship here, a lake freighter called the Frontenac. And a lot of times these boats come into our harbor for the winter to do maintenance and all that stuff, because the Great Lakes are often frozen over, and you can see the ice in the background in this photo. Originally, I was around on the other side of the harbor. Now you can see some buildings across the harbor. I was over there thinking I was going to get a shot of this boat, but the sun was still a fair bit up in the sky and shining fairly bright. And I just wasn't pleased with how it was going to turn. I think the sun was going to ruin the shot, to be honest with you. So I drove back around. It only takes about 5 minutes to drive around the harbor here. And when I got to the tail end of the ship here, you could see the rudder and all that. The sun was perfectly positioned behind it, where so I put my phone on a tripod, and this was with the ultra wide, and I did a vertical shot. I believe when you're looking at on your phones, it'll be square. I'm going to reformat it for that reason, just to get a better look at it. But so I set it up for, I believe it was 30 seconds. And so that gives you, the clouds were moving at a good rate. So 30 seconds was plenty of time to, get a lot of cloud movement. And the clouds just happened to be moving from behind the ship towards me, which gives it like almost like a glow look, like, and it just really, they come from centrally behind the ship and out towards all the edges of the frame, which I thought was really cool. And the only thing I didn't like was the fact that the ropes disappeared off to the side. I tried to get back to the the thing that the ropes are tied to, but then the sun was in the frame and it was just ruined it. So this was the best I could do with it. And then all I did was, bring up some shadows in the ship, because it was fairly dark. The sun was, the sky was pretty bright, and there's no raw functionality with the long exposure in this app yet. I believe they are working on it. And I think once they nail that down, it's going to be even better. So I'm hoping they get that figured out soon. But anyway, so that's my first shot with a long exposure with Reflex. And then my second shot. Now this is a dock further out the bay a little bit, but you can still see the other side of the water, ice covered water, snow, everything else. This is where people launch their boats to go fishing in the summertime, and they use these rigs or whatever they are to help lift them up, I guess. I don't know. I'm not a fisherman, so I really don't know. But anyway, I shot this in RAW. No, actually, I shot it in ProRAW. Sorry, and when I did the processing on this, I wanted to see just how good Reflex was with a straight RAW. So when you shoot Pro RAW and you develop it in something like Raw Power or Darkroom or even Lightroom Mobile, there's a slider under the raw processing section where it says local tone map. The local tone map is the deep fusion, noise reduction, all that stuff that Apple puts in their photos, the imaging pipeline they call it. So with the local tone mapping, you can dial it down and actually just remove it from the image, and you're left with the plain raw data, the raw image. So when I did that, this image turned out to be really dark because it didn't have all that processing on it. So that's fine. I took the exposure up, and actually I had to take it right to the max to get the brightness back in the image. But I was able to do it with very minimal noise and all that stuff appearing. And all I did was I sharpened it a little wee bit. And there's a version of this on my website. I'll link it in the show notes where you can actually get right in close and have a good look. And the part I want you to look at is where the cables are coming off the top of these metal things, these steel beams or whatever. And you'll see that there's no artifacting or glowing or halo effect between the cables and the background, whereas with the JPEG there was, because it was trying to do too much rendering with the lights and the darks. And I've seen this happen before in images, but with the RAW, I'm able to control that, and it actually turns out really well, in my opinion anyway. So, go to my website, shotoniphoneonly.com. There's a behind the shot thing where you'll see this picture. You can see it on your phones right now if you're listening to the podcast, and there'll be a link in the show notes. Go have a look, and you'll see a nice, highly detailed version of it, and you can see just how good Reeflex is at RAW, which I think it's pretty darn good, because there's good shadow detail, good highlight detail. None of this is blown out in the highs or the lows, and I was pretty impressed with how it went. And finally, this one, and I hope you can see it on the on your podcast app that you've got running there. It's either Apple Podcasts, Overcast, or Pocket Cast. I know all those three will show the images while you're listening, but this looks a little funky when you first look at it. It looks like a double exposure, and it kind of is, but it kind of isn't, because this photo, I was set up with the wide camera, and I was taking pictures of these old dead birch trees that are actually in the water in the summertime. The water level's up high enough that they're actually in the water. And when I was going through the 30-second exposure of this, I thought, what would happen if I hit the camera switcher and went from wide to ultra wide? I wondered if it would just stop the shot or what it would do. And when I hit it, the camera switched, but it kept exposing the image, which I thought was so freaky, because I actually switched cameras, but yet it exposed the same thing, just with a different view, like a wider view. So you've got the trees in the foreground for the first 15 seconds. And then when I switch the view, it looks like they're further back. And I had to do this with the horizon line dead center, or you'd see two horizon lines because of the way the angle changes. The angle of view, I guess, changes in the two different cameras. But I was really surprised that this worked. And so I sent it to the developers and I said, hey, did you guys realize that this can be, you could do this? And I told them what I did, and they didn't know. They didn't realize. I've tried it in just about any other camera app I've got, and none of them would do it. The only one that did was Spectre, but with a 9-second maximum exposure, it really had no benefit to try this. But at least with Reflex, you can have it set for whatever your duration is of your long exposure, and you can switch the camera. You could actually switch from the tele to the wide to the ultra wide, and it would still do the same thing. So now this is called the Macmillan effect, because it's something that I just kind of discovered and thought it was pretty darn cool. And I tried it 2 or 3 different times too. So it wasn't a freak accident or whatever. The developer, the guy that does the code, once he tried it and saw that it actually worked, then he said, well, yeah, I guess it would have that functionality. Now, why it won't work in any other camera app, I don't know. I tried it in Camera Plus too. I tried it in slow shutter. I tried it in anything that could do a long exposure, and none of them worked. Like I say, except Spectre, but at 9 seconds, it was barely worth. Like it just didn't turn out. So I thought this is really cool. I'm going to try this sometime when I do light trails and stuff like that. I'm going to try this and see what I can get. And I think it could be some pretty cool use cases for it. So pretty fun stuff.
Most definitely. When you mentioned on the post the McMillan effect, when you explain it now, it makes a lot more sense.
Yeah. It's a lot easier to explain verbally than it is like trying to write it in the post. Yeah. But yeah,
it is definitely cool. It is definitely a pseudo double exposure effect. It has a really nice look because it's not overly, it's a good amount of ghosting where it looks nice, but it doesn't distract from the image like sometimes it can.
Yeah. And I should say too, for those who can't take a look at their phone real quick, it's a picture of these, basically these dead birch trees with no branches. So you just basically look at poles sticking out of the ground, but they're in ice. It looks like a cold, desolate wasteland. But you could see some flow in the clouds because they were moving, and it was freaking cold out. I mean, it was like minus 20 degrees. So I didn't take a lot of pictures that day. I was out. I bet you I was at this spot, which was about a 5-minute walk from my car, and I was here for probably 3 or 4 minutes max, and my hands were getting numb, and I was out of there. It was so cold. But so that's basically what it is. You go blue sky, snow and ice on the ground, and these sticks sticking up, and it is just a lot of people around here go there to take pictures of these little trees. And because it's fun, it's cool. I did one last year where they were actually sticking out of the icy water, and but yeah, it's pretty cool. And yeah, Dave, like I think if I split up a 4-minute exposure with 2-minute shots or whatever, I think it might have been overdone. Yeah. But to have those ones in the background from the ultra wide, just kind of slightly ghosting in the background, I think it kind of makes it for a better shot. So I have a tip. My tip is going to be Reeflex related again. I mean, this show is going to be all about Reeflex for me, I guess, but it's their YouTube channel. And I might as well say along with that, their website. If you open the Reeflex app and go to the settings, which is those 3 little lines at the bottom right with little buttons on them, at the top of the screen, you will see, I better just double check what it is here. You'll see Reeflex Pro Camera tutorial. And if you tap that, you're still in the camera app, but it opens up a web page that shows you some of their YouTube videos and explanation of all the different components of the camera and the functions and features and all that stuff. It's a great place to go and see all the stuff that makes this app what it is. And there's even a little Safari browser button in the bottom right corner where you can just tap that and it'll open it in Safari. It'll get you out of the camera app and just open it in Safari on your iPhone. And, again, there's videos and all that stuff. So the videos that are on there, I'm not sure if all of them are on the YouTube channel, but the videos that are there will most likely be on the YouTube channel where you can go and learn how to use different components. They're all short videos, like, 30 seconds. I think they're all pretty much less than a minute. And it really gives you a good idea how to use the different components of the camera. And the other tip, the last part of the tip related to Reeflex is just go to their website, their regular website. I believe it's called reflexstore.com. And they're actually selling lenses, just like you would see with Moment and Sandmark and all that stuff. There's, I believe, 6 lenses, and Shane Mawson is doing a video about them. So stay tuned for that. I'm not sure when he's coming out with it, but I believe he's going to do a video where he hopefully shows all 6 lenses. And, just another player in the game. They've got, it looks like a fairly nice case that goes with these lenses. They're screw mount, just like the Sandmark and the Struman lenses. And there'll be a link in the show notes for all this stuff for Reeflex. So that's my tip. Basically, this whole show has been a tip about Reeflex, I must say. So I think that's about it.
Lots of packed into the show tonight. The show tonight.
I think I'm winded. So, okay. Well, tell everybody where they could find you, Dave.
Sure. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter as ProfPod, and on TikTok. I did just change it here, so let me double check.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, ProfPod was taken. I normally, if I'm early on with social networks, I can get ProfPod, but I got ProfPod PGH. So it's close.
Oh, okay, for Pittsburgh.
It's close, exactly. Yeah. So it's close. So
okay.
Basically, if you follow me on Instagram, you see the reels I put up. They're pretty much TikToks. So unless you want to follow me multiple places, or if you're already on TikTok, there's not a need to follow me there. If you already follow me on Instagram to see some more information.
All right. Then you can find me on Instagram, Macmillan Photo, Twitter, Macmillan_photo. And I'm steadily adding stuff to my website, shotoniPhoneonly.com. And I'm putting some, behind the shot stuff on there. So basically a picture, and then I explain, how the shot came to be or whatever. So I think I've got 3 behind the shots on there or whatever now. So yeah. And again, apologize for those who are fans of the YouTube version of this show, but for now it's going to be audio only, and we will put up little video clips of this and that whenever we can. And the show resides on iPhoneography.ca, and it's available on, the Apple Podcasts app, Overcast, Pocket Cast, just about anywhere where you can get a podcast, Spotify, iHeartRadio, you can find it there. Just look for iPhoneography Podcast and you'll find it. And I guess that's it for this week. So thanks, Dave. Thanks for sitting back and listening to me yammer on here. And
it's always good to hear about something new.
Yeah. So, happy Valentine's Day, everybody. And I guess we will see you all in the next one.
Have a great one, everyone.
Bye-bye.